Hello and welcome to the MMQB NFL podcast. I'm Conor. Albert Breer's here, and for the next week, I represent the most frustrating thing in the world to Albert, which is obnoxious Notre Dame fans that did not draw a single credit from the university while Albert actually went to Ohio State. Yes, our teams are playing in the national championship. I didn't want it to happen. I wanted the normal order of the universe to take over, which is I wanted Texas to beat Ohio State and then Texas to just out-athlete Notre Dame and beat us by 50 in the national title. That's what I'm familiar with. That's what I know. But this game, I don't know. It feels different. I have a lot of friends who think we can win. I don't. But this is gonna be a fun week.
Yeah, I mean, I think the out athlete thing is sort of what's happened in a lot of Ohio State Notre Dame games. So we'll see. I'm a little torn though because I grew up hating Notre Dame. Like I couldn't stand Notre Dame, and it's actually for those who don't know that are listening, it's because I grew up a Michigan fan, and I am a triple legacy at the University of Michigan, and so when I flipped and became the black sheep, I carried over my hatred of Notre Dame because Michigan people hate Notre Dame, and like Ohio State people don't like Notre Dame either. And the reason why is because this is the core reason why is because they refuse to join the Big Ten. And they're like, in so many different ways, they would fit the Big Ten, but they've always sort of thumbed their nose at the Big Ten. And so I've always hated Notre Dame, and there's one reason why it's become much harder for me over the last 3 years. You know what that reason is?
Because they're just generally not competitive in a serious way.
Because I love Marcus Freeman.
Oh,
and Marcus Freeman was a captain and an All-American linebacker at Ohio State. And if you want to know how I feel about Marcus Freeman, if I had a wish list, if Ryan Day were to walk, I'm not firing Ryan Day, by the way.
Yet,
just to make that clear for everybody who might.
It's early in the week.
Yeah. But if Ryan Day were to walk away after multiple national championships, hopefully, then I would, on my wish list, have at number one, Mike Vrabel, and number two, Marcus Freeman. I think the world of Marcus Freeman. And I think the highest compliment I can give Marcus Freeman, at risk of turning this into a college football podcast now, Conor, is that his teams look like Jim Tressel teams. His teams win the same way Jim Tressel teams won. And that scares me a little bit because I remember how Ohio State won the 2002 national championship, and they had a lot of great players in that team, but they played against a Miami team that, I don't know how to describe to people from this generation how talented those Miami teams are. You remember, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the year before, when Miami won the national title, Vince Wilfork and Sean Taylor were backups on that team, right? Andre Johnson, Sean Taylor,
silly.
Kellen Winslow,
Greg Olson.
I mean, Willis McGahee. They were just outrageously talented. And I saw a Jim Tressel team basically take that talented Miami team into a dark alley and turn it into a bare knuckle brawl and wind up winning. And so that's what I'm a little afraid of, is that Marcus Freeman's bringing this Jim Tressel team in to play the juggernaut, because I've seen that movie before.
Again, no one cares. I mean, if you, what I think, and, we have a whole group of people at Sports Illustrated whose job it is to do this. But I think the only way that we could win, and I say we again loosely, having been flatly denied from admission from this college, that was one of the fastest no's that I've ever gotten.
Well, actually, just so people know, it was a no from Michigan that led me to Ohio State, so I can relate.
I asked my parents if I could do the Rudy thing. I was like, can I go to the college next door for 2 years and transfer in? And they were like, no, because you're an idiot and you couldn't get into that one either, so it doesn't matter.
Was it St. Mary's? Is that right? I can't remember.
I think it was. Yeah, right. I was like, oh, I'm going to do the whole thing and then it's going to be this big thing. And my parents were like, no, you're not. Just pick somewhere else.
I mean, it is a beautiful, beautiful place. Have you been there? It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah,
it's really, really
nice.
I
love it there.
I mean, South Bend itself is a little. It's
you don't want to get stuck in the town.
Yeah. It's weird. It's just a weird kind of how you just drop that is sort of what you would think, like kind of like a Rust Belt, like Indiana town would be around like this, like unbelievable like campus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only way I think they could win is if they played like Army and Riley Leonard had like 150 rushing yards and we just
They have to
kept the
muck it
ball for
up.
like yeah,
They have to muck it up.
yeah,
They have to.
yeah.
They what they can't have happen. See what Texas did is Texas. It looked like Ohio State was going to run away with it, but Texas basically forced Ohio State to go on these 10, 12, 14 play drives and said like, okay, like we're going to bet you're going to make a mistake somewhere. And then there was the penalty on Travion Henderson on the second drive of the game. And now all of a sudden it's the middle of the second quarter and it's only 7-0 and you have a game. So I think it'd have to be something like that.
All right, moving on to the NFL world.
Yeah, we've wasted like 15 minutes of everybody's time.
You know what it is? Because and it's funny because like when Notre Dame was last in the national title against Alabama, you know, none of my friends were like, "Do you want to get together for this?" You know,
Yeah.
because it was like we just knew that it was going to be, you know, a slaughter, and it's like, you know, I don't want to remember that. You know, it's just like, you know, whatever. I think I got Subway. I went and got Subway, and I sat in. Andy McCullough, who covers baseball for The Athletic, he let me sit in his apartment and watch it because I don't think I had a TV at that point. I was just like, so I.
Wow, tough times. No TV.
Yeah, well, I think I was like or maybe I was an intern at that point,
and
or
you
I was
just
like
moved and then like
moving or whatever it
yeah.
was. Yeah, I just don't think I had everything set up.
I was gonna
at that
say
point.
like.
No, the Star Ledger paid me at some point. But I just remember being like, I don't want to make this into a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
But this time, all my friends are going down. One called me last night and was like, you know, you need to stop this shit about like how we're not going to be competitive athletically. Like this game is going to like everyone's mad at me because I am so pessimistic about it. But what's cool is, you know, we're all together in the group chat. It's good. I like when that happens. And
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, the one thing that does make me feel a little better about that not happening is that Ohio State just had its dark alley game and just had its game where it had 12 penalties and like everything got messed up. You know what I mean? And
right.
And Texas is really talented too.
I know. Texas would have. I mean, again, I got to stop because I'm going to get in trouble with my friends. But Texas would have beaten Notre Dame by 3 touchdowns. So whatever. I can be that guy. I'm all right. I got dunked on by Golick on Golick Jr. on Twitter for when we were up on Georgia by like 3 touchdowns. I was like, we're going to lose this game 48-21. Like I just know. It's just I've been here before. I mean, like I've watched every game since
I
like
will say that was weird because it kind of felt like, didn't it feel like that game like the shoe, like I felt like the other shoe was going to drop and it never did. I mean, it was really impressive. Like I thought really impressive how tough they were to like kind of keep Georgia engaged in that kind of game. You know, I thought it was. I don't know. It was eye opening, that one.
I mean, whatever. I've been seeing the shoe drop for 35 years. So I was like, okay, at some point it's going to drop. Anyway, before we get into wrapping up, and thanks guys for being patient. We wanted to wait an extra day because we had the Monday night game and we don't want to leave one wild card game hanging or one playoff game hanging until we get into the divisional round. So we wanted to wrap up everything into a nice little box. But before we do, we should do the Cowboys and Jerry Jones their obligatory favor and say that Mike McCarthy was let go and that Jerry Jones and Deion Sanders are talking because this is what he wants us to do, Albert. He wants us to say that they're talking and he wants us to pay attention to the Cowboys instead of the playoffs. And so I will give you the floor.
I love to. I don't know if it was a mistake, but the McCarthy news dropped like right in the middle of the Mike Vrabel press conference.
I absolutely don't think that's a mistake. And then with 2 completely divergent reasons, right? It was, okay, Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys can't agree on length of contract. And then Jerry Jones saying, we never even talked about a contract.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Phenomenal.
Unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, it's the weirdest thing because it's like I feel like if Mike McCarthy had 2 years left on his contract, like they would have had him back. You know?
Agreed.
And that to me is the strangest thing about this is that like Mike came into the season under a tremendous amount of pressure. They won 12 games 3 years in a row. He's still fighting for his job. And everything that could go wrong kind of did go wrong this year, you know? Like Zimmer's defense struggled early on. Micah Parsons got hurt had a high ankle sprain that lingered. He lost to Marcus Lawrence for the year. Then he loses Dak Prescott for the year. CeeDee Lamb's banged up. I don't know. Like, I don't know too many people that wouldn't say, like, yeah, the Cowboys can be proud of the way their team played this year, right?
Or any other circumstance when the owner's first priority is not how much juice can I squeeze out of this thing, I think that Mike McCarthy would have come back. I think he did a good job. And I think we will see that the fact that he's interviewing with two other teams, and even if he doesn't get the Saints job or the Bears job, and I'm not sure exactly what happens at that point, I think he could get a very high-profile offensive coordinator gig with a defensive-minded head coach in this cycle, and I think he'd be in demand. I think he's good at his job. He has been. I mean, how many 12-win seasons did he have in Dallas?
Can we do? Can I do one of those blind resume things?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Do it.
All right. Both these coaches, 18 years in the NFL. Okay. Coach 1, 174 wins. Coach 2, 183 wins. Coach 1, 61% winning percentage. Coach 2, 63% winning percentage. Coach 1, 12 playoff appearances. Coach 2, 18 playoff appearances. Coach 1, 11-11 postseason record. Coach 2, 8-10 postseason record. Coach 1, one Super Bowl championship. Coach 2, one Super Bowl championship. Coach 1, 4 conference title appearances. Coach 2, 3 conference title appearances. Who are the two coaches?
Well, one's McCarthy.
Yep.
And the other, Mike Tomlin.
Yep. You got it.
Oh,
What's the difference between the two of them?
aren't they? Well, no, Mike
It's
Tomlin
close.
coaches
I mean,
in
like,
Pittsburgh.
so Mike
and-
Tomlin has had more regular season success. Mike McCarthy's had more postseason success. Now the differences are relatively marginal given like how big a body of work that is, you know? But yeah, I mean, I think you look at the two of them and it's like perception of those two is very different. But if Mike Tomlin were available on the market right now Mike Tomlin's a little younger too, which certainly would affect that. But if Mike Tomlin were available on the market, were available right now, everyone would want to talk to him. Right. I don't know. I just think sometimes perception and reality can be in two different places on this. So, I mean, I think that he'd be a good hire for the Saints. I think he'd be a good hire for the Bears. Like, are you going to win the press conference? Probably not. It may not be as exciting as hiring some of these other guys, but like just as far as like the total package that he brings to the table, I mean, he's shown he can set up a program. I think he's fairly innovative in the way he takes care of his players. His players very clearly play for him, and did this year in adverse conditions. He's got quarterback development in his background. I mean, go look at the way, if you want to look at it, go look at Aaron Rodgers' delivery in college, and then look at his delivery 3 years later when he became the Packers starter. It's night and day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's got a ton of history as an offensive play caller. Like I don't know, like that seems like a pretty attractive package of results. And I think you can even like look at it and say it's enhanced a little bit. Like when you look at Aaron Rodgers with Mike McCarthy versus without Mike McCarthy, and then Dak Prescott with Mike McCarthy versus without Mike McCarthy. I think it'd be hard to argue that those guys didn't have their best years with him, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's the third time head coaching candidate thing that I think throws people off before they realize that like Pete Carroll was a third time head coaching candidate when he started to, the rubber really started to meet the road for him. And
it was probably right around the same age McCarthy is now, right?
Probably, right?
I think he was almost 60 when he took the Seahawks job.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean, again, I think that I like McCarthy as a coach. I think he's got a good shot. I think he deserves another shot. And, at this point,
and it feels, I don't know, doesn't it feel to me like the Cowboys have no plan?
Well, do you want to hear my conspiracy theory?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the plan all along was, probably knew that there was a comfort level with Kellen Moore, right?
Yeah.
And that you could just bring him back into the fold and that, he's familiar with it. And whenever you called, he was ready, kind of like a Jason Garrett thing. But then if you let go of Mike McCarthy, what you do is you probably draw out the Deion Sanders thing as
Yeah.
long as you possibly can. And you get all the attention for it. And then you make it look like, Kellen triumphed over Dion in the interview process or whatever it is, and you hype it up, and there's this big thing. When in reality, it's just like, yeah, we're just bringing back the guy that, we had as the offensive coordinator before.
Right.
I mean, that's my chaos theory at this point.
Which is like another version of Jason Garrett, right? Because
Exactly.
it's like, to me, I think one thing Jerry loved about Jason is like, Jason was sort of his, I don't think this is true, but I think it's probably, it's sort of the way he looked at it was like, Jason was his creation,
Right.
Like, and I think Kellen's the same thing. It's like, I'm the one who let him in like the game plan meetings when he was still a player. I'm the one who like saw it in him to like immediately turn him into a coach and to push him up the ladder really fast. Like, and I think Kellen would be a good hire. Like I do. Like I think
Kellen's great. Yeah.
I think Kellen's a really good coach. So I mean, if that's the plan, like I don't have a huge issue with that. Like I look at it like, and it's like the thing that bothers me about it is it's allowing contracts to get in the way. You know what I mean? It's allowing money to get in the way. And that always bothers me with owners because I do feel like in this case, I mean, look, like I don't know how much this has been out there, and but I've known it for a while. Like there's been a push, and I'm not going to use the C word here, but I mean, people will know where I'm going. Like there's been a push among owners to stop paying so much dead money on coaching contracts, and
Yes.
like where like Tepper's a great example where he's still paying Matt Rule and Frank Reich while his head coach is actually Dave Canales and stuff like that, right? So like they've got like these slides at the owners meetings that go up and show how much the league is quote unquote wasting on coaching contracts. And because all these guys run their businesses like they've got a board to answer to, which they don't, by the way. But there's like this push, like, hey, we got to stop doing this. And we got to come together to stop doing this. We got to have a unified front. And I mean, it sounds to me like Jerry's sort of been the leader of the pack on that, which is why he's let coaches' contracts run out this way. And I think in this case, it really put him in a bind where, like, maybe the guy that he would have wanted to keep, it just made things way too complicated at the end. And he'd pissed off his own coach to the point at the end where things weren't really palatable going forward. So, I'd say the same thing about the Cowboys that I've said about the Patriots over the last week. You can say they got to the right result and the process sucked. I think the process of this really sucks.
Here's the one thing that I want Cowboys fans to take away. If I were to say, here's my one takeaway, right? Jerry Jones last season allowed the team to go into a year with a coach and a staff all on 1-year contracts.
Yep.
So he played a season with a coach and a staff.
Even Mike Zimmer,
came
in as a defensive
came in there. Yeah. So he allowed that group to play a season when clearly he did not have full confidence in anyone, because if he did, he would have extended them already. Okay. And then he fired Mike McCarthy because they couldn't agree on the length of a contract. So Jerry Jones was planning on having a coaching staff, again, go out the following season without the strength of a full coaching contract. So your owner, just so everyone is clear, doesn't really care because this is good enough for him, right? It's just like, all right, whatever.
And this is the most valuable brand worldwide in sports. More valuable than Real Madrid, more valuable than Manchester City, I mean, more valuable than the Yankees. Like, it is the most valuable brand in all of sports.
And it was just like, okay, well, I like him. I don't like him enough to give him a 4-year contract, but I would like him to coach under a 3-year contract. So you want that guy? I don't know. I think that's just like, it's ridiculous,
Yeah. So just to give people, it's worth over $10 billion now. And if the Cowboys were ever for sale, I think it would probably go for more than that, to be honest with you.
Well, that's where we're at. I'm sure you guys will enjoy in a couple weeks coming back when Albert and I are doing the Deion Sanders hour, and we're both in mirrored sunglasses, and we're drinking prime coffee in the morning and all that good
You
stuff.
know what'd be really fun though? Belichick.
Oh, Belichick would be great, right? Belichick would be awesome.
Belichick working for Jerry would be the most just phenomenal story. Phenomenal.
I'll just say this, and I said it to my wife last night. I was like, and this is no disrespect to Deion Sanders, it's more a recognition of the fact that I am turning into an old man. If Deion Sanders becomes head coach of the Cowboys, that's where I kind of start. My boat starts leaving the harbor. Like when your parents, like whatever, like my dad
starts leaving the harbor.
You know what I mean? Like my dad grew up like a huge basketball fan, loved basketball, and we would watch college basketball in the NBA. And then, but then at the conclusion of like the Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson era, it became like drive and dish basketball, the LeBron, Steph Curry era, and
the ISO
it was just
ball,
and he was just like, you know what? There was no disrespect. It's just like that's not the thing that I
fell in love with.
So I don't like it anymore. And while I would never like leave the NFL, like that would probably be the first like little moment where it's just like, okay, this just isn't, like this just isn't what I'm used to. And
what's funny is like now, you use that analogy, my boat's leaving the harbor. Like now I just have like this, I have like this image of like the Forrest Gump tugboat like pulling away from a dock. Yeah.
All of you guys are still covering the NFL. I'm like, bye, everybody.
Yeah.
See ya. Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. With their Pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on a player's stats, like yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and more. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the Win Now button to cash out whenever you want. Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. Now, I am not much of a pick'em expert, but a lot of my friends too, who are novices in this whole thing, say that Underdog is the best way to immediately get into the game. For example, this week, look at, hey, is Brock Bowers going to get higher or lower than 8 catches? Is Joe Mixon going to score more or less than 1 touchdown? These are great ways to get into the game, spice up the action a little bit, and make your weekend of watching football all the more enjoyable. And Underdog is the best place to play Pick'em. Download the app, sign up with promo code MMQB, and deposit now to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's promo code MMQB. You must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years or older in Colorado for some games, 21 years or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado for some games. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. Anyway, let's get into Wild Card Weekend. No longer Super Wild Card Weekend, Albert, and it wasn't super, so that's good. There was one.
Do you want to like big picture this first, though? Like why there are so many blowouts?
Yes.
Because it's funny, like
don't make the committee joke. Don't make the committee joke.
I already made that one. It wasn't that funny. It's just I gotta leave that alone.
There were 800 people who made the committee joke. Anyway,
but I think like I do think like I actually think the problem like the NFL has is similar to college, where like there's just a gap between the elite and the next level and the next level and the level after that. Like I just think there are gaps, and I've got a working theory that I want to just kind of like take out of the garage for a test drive with you real quick, if that's cool. Um, that theory is that the quarterback has become so important and the rules have become so slanted to the quarterback. And the league has tweaked so many different things to favor the quarterback and favor the offense and favor the passing game and promote scoring that that's having that single position filled with an elite player makes such a big difference that when you get into these high leverage situations where teams are saying, okay, we're in a single elimination spot now, and we're going to put everything into stopping this team, the gap just shows up, right? So if you have Patrick Mahomes or you have Josh Allen or you have Lamar Jackson, when you get on that stage, all of a sudden it's like, whoa. Like even last night, right? Like they had Matthew Stafford.
Right.
Some of the throws Stafford made last night, it's like, holy crap.
Yes.
Then you see, I love the year Sam Darnold had, but you see the Rams having a week to game plan Sam Darnold. And like, I'm not saying you don't do that during the regular season, but I think there's a different level of intensity on it in the playoffs. And there's like a little bit more of a like burn the boats mentality during the playoffs where it's like, we're not holding anything back anymore, you know?
Right.
And so like, that's my working theory. I don't know. I still, like I said, I'm still like, I just pressed the button on the garage door opener. Like the garage door opener is coming up right now.
I like it.
I'm like throwing the car in reverse.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that I'm ready to take this one out in the highway yet. You know,
here's mine. And and again, it's not necessarily, again, it's quarterback dependent.
Yeah.
But we saw, and it's so funny because a little bit, it's Brian Flores' fault what happened to the Vikings offense last night because
they
Flores
broke and then
just blitzing the bejesus out of someone. And I know that Flores is a versatile coordinator, but I talked to Mike Tomlin about what he loved about Flores, and he was like, Flores came onto my radar, and he was like, there was a game when he was the Dolphins head coach.
Against the Ravens, right?
Against the Ravens, where he zero blitzed Lamar Jackson 40 times in a game.
It was a good story by Conor. Check it out.
But that mentality and that ethos, he took that to Minnesota. So every play pre-snap looks like absolute chaos, and it looks different, and you're not going to get a beat on it. And he was pioneering that into this season. And so Detroit, while the game plan was different against the Vikings in the season finale, the ethos was there, which was just constant pressure. It was constant chaos. See if you can handle it. We're going to beat the crap out of you. So the Rams saw that, and they're like, okay, yeah, like, let's do it. And, it's not like with Minnesota, it's like even with a week to prepare for that, you're not going to be able to get your offensive line better at handling simulated pressure. You're not going to change who Darnold is. I thought, and so I wonder, big picture, and then we'll talk about the game itself, if we're going to end up seeing, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, all those guys basically playing against a Fangio umbrella style defense where you're just trying to hold them and keep them from, beating the crap out of you. And then everybody else just gets the shit blitzed out of them every down, until they prove that they can handle it, And so we end up having sort of a disparity between, okay, the games between two quarterbacks are good, the games between quarterback and non-quarterback are bad, and the games between two bad quarterbacks are awful because they're just like, it's just like two teams with like 5 defensive scores between the two of them.
Yeah. It was, and I do think like the gambling nature, when you're able to get them a couple times, and now you're playing from behind. I mean, it's just a totally and look, like this has been like a criticism of the McVay, Shanahan, like, and now O'Connell offenses is that like if you get them from behind, they're much easier to defend, right? Like because now all of a sudden the marriage of the run and the pass doesn't work the same, play action doesn't work the same, and your quarterback's going to be a sitting duck more often. And like I think that's another thing, like where you look at the truly elite quarterbacks, like something you see in these games as well. If you're in third and long more often, you're playing from behind more often. Like, how do you react? And
Right.
like the great quarterbacks can dig you out of that. And I think once the Vikings fell behind last night, Sam Darnold looked like a totally different guy. And, you almost felt bad because he's had such a great year, but God, does it look like the last like 9-10 days cost him a lot of money.
So let's start there.
Yeah.
So I have just a peek behind the curtain. I have the scores up and I have stats and stuff up. But then sometimes out of the corner of your eye, like you have your Word document over here, and then you also have like a web browser that's open, just in case you need to double check some stats that we're talking about. And then something just popped on my screen. I got a notification from ESPN. Betting buzz. Bettors are fading Ohio State. Title game spread moving towards Notre Dame.
Oh, there you go.
Let's go.
There you go.
So I don't know.
Getting faded.
Maybe.
Did it open at like what, 9.5, something like that, right?
I know that's the thing.
They had some room to work with.
Yeah. Whoever took, I would take Ohio State minus 9.5. I'm not whatever.
You're really pessimistic about your team there.
That's okay. That's how I do it, right? Every fan is different. Our editor, John Plume, who I guess was rightfully pessimistic about the Vikings. He's a massive Vikings fan.
He's a big Notre Dame guy too. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
We have to talk about that.
I found out, the way I found out is when I went to Ohio State Notre Dame. I went to both the games in 22 and 23, but when I went to the one at Notre Dame in South Bend, he and I talked on the phone, and he asked me to pick up some gear for him at the bookstore.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's how I found out.
All right. But he's a massive Vikings fan, and he's on this magical run, 14-win season. Mm-hmm. And every game when they're down, down 7 points, and in the group Slack, it's just like, this team sucks, and it's just like, but that is okay. That's a brand of fandom, right? Like you're either wildly optimistic.
That's also like
in the middle.
Underrated, like beaten up fan base. Like like Boston, obviously, like up here, it was storied how beat up we were. And that was like even a little overblown because like the longest title drought, like for all the teams, was I think 15 years, which is a long time, but relatively speaking, not that bad. Cleveland, I think, is like really, before that Cavs championship, you had, they made a movie about how bad your baseball team was. You had the Indians then losing in heartbreaking fashion in 2 World Series. You had the drive, the fumble. Then the Browns somehow leaving town, despite how passionate the fan base is there, then coming back, right, in a like worse fashion, and the team that left became the Ravens, right?
Coming back and then being like, we're the Deshaun Watson team,
right?
And it's like,
and the team that left becomes the freaking Ravens, right?
Right.
And then you have like LeBron leaving, right? Like where he's actually from there, and a local hero. So like Cleveland has had a case before they won in 16 for being most tortured. Nobody really talks about Minnesota. We gotta get John's take on this, like where they rank now, because I think they're like they may be number 1, like most tortured. Because Cleveland has Ohio State, but Cleveland also like they won. So LeBron won in 16 there, and that's a hometown hero. So that takes away from it a little bit. I think Minnesota might be number 1.
My take on that, though, is that they had the Minneapolis Miracle. And if you have a moment with a name, even if it doesn't result in a championship, sometimes that's like better. They
lost 4 Super Bowls, right? They had the wrong way thing. They lost the World Series twice with Kirby Puckett, right? No, they won.
Oh, hold on.
Wait. The Twins won, right? The Twins won. They beat the Braves.
Hold on.
Yeah.
You are massively fading the Minnesota Lynx, WNBA champions in 11, 13, 15, and 17. Yeah, Lynx are a powerhouse. I don't know what the Minnesota Frost is. Oh, Professional Women's Hockey League 2024 Walter Cup champions. What's Minneapolis SC? 28 and 18 and 2019 champions. The Twins won a World Series last in 91.
Yeah, they won in 91 and 87, right? Is that right?
Looks like the Vikings the last time was...
Yeah, the Twins won in 87 and 91.
Okay. Vikings. It's great radio. Great podcasting. Super Bowl for the Vikings. There's probably like someone listening being like, God damn it.
We're like 45 minutes in. We've gotten to one game.
Just mostly college football talk. When was their last?
Was the last like of the big four was the Twins in 91.
Okay. So
and they lost the North Stars too, which I think is comparable to the Browns leaving based on like what football means in Cleveland and what hockey means in Minnesota, right? Like that's comparable. Losing the North Stars.
This breakdown of Minnesota Timberwolves championships 0, conference titles 0, division titles 1, 2004, retired numbers 1.
It's funny.
So the T-Wolves still have a long way to go.
It's funny too because like they actually like during that period where Boston was winning all the championships, right? Kevin Garnett comes here, wins a championship. David Ortiz comes here, wins multiple championships, becomes a folk hero. Randy Moss winds up here, breaks every record in the book. So,
and Kevin Garnett's not even their retired number.
They haven't retired his
incredible
yet?
No, Malik Sealy I
mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, it died in a tragic automobile accident, but he was
horrible. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, I guess if you're doing it that way, where it's more like reverential, and then you don't like, because you don't want to juxtapose like a franchise legend against someone who we lost too soon. That makes sense. But
how's Kevin Garnett's number not retired though? Like he's by far the best player in the history of that franchise, right?
Now I'm like all in on Timberwolves stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to get like...
Can we get like John Pop on real quick?
So there's someone, Leonard Miller. He makes $1.8 million a year. So definitely not on the high end of the Timberwolves roster. That is wearing number 21. He's wearing Garnett's number this year. So
that's unbelievable.
Anyway, so what we saw last night in that game, Albert, I think, we just to kind of bridge it from the last segment here is we saw, a great job by the Rams of taking some ideas from that Lions game and applying them to Sam Darnold again. It was constant pressure. And then what they did in the second half, which I thought was cool, was you end up faking some of that pressure, and then you start dropping those guys into coverage. And what happens there is Darnold is still rattled. He's still holding onto the ball, but now there's even less of a chance that he's going to find an opening and he's going to get rid of it. And you could see O'Connell on the sidelines, like wanting to get rid of the ball. But a lot of times, and I'm eager to go back and the All-22 just dropped, so I'm going to go back and watch that at some point today, is how many of those opportunities did he really even have? Did he have a chance to do it? Because the Rams, I mean, look, there are some days when the defensive line just beats the crap out of your offensive line or your linebackers, your pressure guys, and sometimes they just win. And I think that was a big part of this.
Yeah. Chris Shula did a heck of a job. He's done a heck of a job all year.
I know.
I think, like, looking at what, like, they've been able to do just as far as developing young guys and getting them ready to go. And I think Les Snead and the personnel department deserve credit too, because the job that they've done, like post Aaron Donald, where now they've got Jared Verse, they've got Braden Fisk, they've got Kobe Turner, they've got Byron Young, like to come out of Aaron Donald with that and to look at the way they did in a playoff game was really impressive. Finding guys at corner, like corner is still not a strength for them. And I don't know exactly how they're going to go about covering A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith next week, but they sure look like they could do it with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison on the other side with guys like Witherspoon, who they picked up off the scrap heap, Darius Williams coming back. So, it's just a really impressive job all the way around. And, like to come again, like this is a defense that a couple of years ago was really relying on Aaron Donald when they won the championship, Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey, all those guys are gone. And so, Rams deserve a lot of credit for the job they did defensively yesterday for sure. And Stafford played really, really well.
Do you think Aaron Donald? I had predicted before the season that they were going to go on a run and that Donald was going to unretire. Do you think he wishes he was? Can you? You still can't make it happen, right? There's no.
I think once the play, isn't it like the rule that you have to be on the roster at the end of the season or something like that? At the end of the regular
They should have just put him on there. You should have just lost the guy. Just be like, listen, man, we're signing you to the active roster, and I'll go at 51 to the game. Like I'll lose a gunner.
Actually,
on
you
the
know what?
punt
I
team.
guess it could still happen because when did they add? No. Eric Weddle was like in December, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was late in the season. Yeah.
So, but you
Weddle's
can still
beard.
add guys, but I don't know. I don't know what the rules are on that.
I think Donald would have to clear waivers.
Would he?
And then, like, no one obviously would allow that to happen.
If you're the Niners, wouldn't you immediately like put in a waiver claim?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'd be like, nah, screw you guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, listen, this is. I'm not going to go as far as Troy Aikman did last night to say that this season is now meaningless because the Vikings didn't win the Super Bowl. But it's a tough spot to be in, and I don't. What I'm interested to hear your take in this. Like, the discourse all last night was, well, this is going to cost Sam Darnold millions and millions and millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars. I mean, maybe what you're looking at here is a situation where the Vikings are like, okay, we were probably going to sign him to try to sign him to some sort of extension or franchise tag him or do something like that. And now it's like, well, maybe we'll just roll with Daniel Jones and JJ McCarthy and we'll see what we got here.
Yeah, I mean, it's still hard because I think, you do have a team that won 14 games. And
14 games and only lost to 2 teams.
And you have every right to think you're close. And you're going to have money to spend. I mean, they were carrying a ton of dead money on their salary cap this year. And you have Justin Jefferson. You have Jonathan Grenard. You have Andrew Van Ginkel. And, like, we'll see if Harrison Smith's back. Obviously, he's older. You have Christian Darrisaw. You have all these guys that, like, I think you sort of owe it to them to give the team the best shot you possibly can to win next year. And I really like JJ McCarthy as a player. They love what they saw in him in the spring and the summer, but isn't that a little bit of a dice roll? Because not only is he coming back from multiple knee surgeries, but he also, lost like 4 months of development time. And so you don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And you probably won't until like June?
Yeah.
So that's a big dice roll to just kind of like leave yourself exposed at the position. With the team that you have. And if it doesn't work out, like, that's a really hard thing to answer for with all the guys I mentioned, like if you're one of those guys, what you care about is winning right now.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like it's worth the franchise tag. It's worth going back down the, Chargers in 2005 route where, Breeze had really played well in 04 during Phillip Rivers' rookie year and sort of blew up the Chargers plan. It was much cheaper to do it then, but they tagged Breeze. They got the extra year out of him. And they transitioned to Rivers the year after. You certainly could see where that might make some sense for the Vikings.
Here's one thing just before we move on, and I think it's very interesting. I'm curious what direction the organization takes this offseason because when the Vikings were good, everyone was getting flowers and, oh, what an amazing job the GM did, what an amazing job the coach did, what an amazing job everybody did. At about 1 a.m. last night, Kevin O'Connell, it was about like midnight Eastern, Kevin O'Connell, quote, "We've got to find a way to solidify the interior of the pocket. There could be 1,000 excuses made, but for me, it's the foundation of the interior of the pocket that we're going to have to take a long look at." That's like saying, beep, beep, beep. Hello, GM.
That's really specific.
Very specific. It's like, hey, Kwesi, the guards in the center are not good enough for me.
Right.
And we have the Kevin O'Connell contract situation. We have, look out. We got a long off season to go, buddy. Yep. That's all I'm saying. All right. To the best game, I thought. Commanders 23, Buccaneers 20. This was always going to be a toss-up. I'm still stunned. It's one of those games that I kind of hate, and I'll make that point in a deeper way with the Eagles-Packers, where it's just like, who screws up the least?
Yeah.
And there was this, jet sweep that just didn't happen for Tampa Bay, right? And that's like that's kind of the difference in the game here. But Again, it's a fun win for the Commanders. I would have rather seen the Buccaneers against the Lions personally. That said, it's good for football, healthy football in general when the Washington franchise is moving on in the
Yeah.
playoffs and we get to see Jaden Daniels in big games.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. Like, I also think like it's just another example of like Jaden Daniels like looks like his heart rate doesn't even like move a tick in the
So,
biggest moments.
do you think that's? But here's my question because someone brought that up to me the other day. So
Yeah.
they kicked the game-winning field goal. It's doinked in. Everyone's going nuts, and
Uh-huh.
Jaden Daniels is just sitting there like, okay. Don't you think he knows he's being filmed in that
So you
moment,
think it's like performative?
and you want like to be the Cam Newton, like okay, like you want that to be the meme where it's just like you're
I
ice cold.
just I just think like that's kind of who he is though. Like I've talked
Could
to his
be.
I've talked to his coaches in Washington about it. Like yeah, one of the things that one of the things one of them said to me is like everything he does looks natural. And like on the field, off the field, just he's very comfortable in his own skin and he moves naturally. And you watch him out there on the field and he's smooth. I think it's a great word to use to describe the way he plays. Everything looks smooth, you know?
Hmm.
And you know, I from my brief conversations with him, you can really kind of sense that. Like there's just a natural cool about him. So I'd say I think, you know, both things can be true. Like it is who he is, and maybe he's playing it up a little too. You know what I mean?
Which
Like,
is cool. Which
yeah,
is you have to have an element of that as
right,
a quarterback for sure.
right.
So one of the things that I'm curious about your take. I mean, I don't know, and everyone can hear different things at different points in time, but like I'd never heard like a massive vote of confidence in like the fact that like the Buccaneers are like, this is who we are and this is who we want to be. Could they at some point now enter the fray of a coaching search, do you think? Or do you think that this is one of
So
those deals where
yeah, this has been like rumored for a couple years. Like, could they move
yeah,
off of Bowles? Could they move off of Bowles? They're at the point now where they might have to do a contract extension with him.
right.
So like I again, like I think like that's one piece of all of these that people don't really pay much attention to because what happens with a lot of these organizations like after 2 years it's like okay, like you know, like everything's going good, like everything's fine, like we're going to ride this out for another year. Um Todd Bowles has a 4-year deal, you get to 3 years, it's like and I think he might have an option for a 5th year in there, but um you know, you get to this point in the contract, it's like that's when you have to start making that having that discussion. And that's what can lead to bigger picture questions. Do we see this guy being our coach in 2030? Um, you know, if we lose Liam Cohen, do we still think we're going to be able to hit on another offensive coordinator? So, yeah, I think on balance, Todd's done a really good job, but this is the point in the contract where like you have to start to ask some of those big picture questions. And I think they probably stay the course with Todd, but I also wouldn't rule out like some of those big picture questions leading to some like serious answers needing to be given, you know. And so I don't know that I don't know that story's been fully written yet.
Yeah. Eagles 22, Packers 10. I was in attendance for this. It was a great afternoon in Philadelphia. Jordan Love with 3 interceptions, Saquon Barkley with 119 yards, and he slid at the end of the game instead of scoring like a 50-yard touchdown,
Yeah.
which funny to me that I love the gambling NFL as a conspiracy people, but now you can tell like who actually watches and understands sports and who is just a tinfoil hat nut job because like there are tweets out there with like hundreds of thousands of likes, and it's like this is why the NFL is a conspiracy. I missed my parlay because Saquon slid. Saquon slid because the game is over, and
Right.
he's an incredibly selfless player. And like
And it's really smart. Like it's just a really
it's a really smart thing to do. Is
I mean,
nothing to do.
not only are you like putting the game away, you're also mitigating any sort of injury risk
100%.
if you
So
know how to slide.
sorry, Dick. Sorry, like Dickie from Port Jarvis, that you missed your 4th leg of the parlay on this, but that's how it's how it goes.
Yeah.
Um, it's
So
just like
can we like I think 2 things about the Eagles coming out of this one. Number one, their defense looks very real. Their defense, and we'll
Defense
get
looks
to the
awesome.
Packers in a second and like how beat up they are and everything else. But there was a point with 5 minutes left in the third quarter where Jalen Hurts had 39 passing yards.
Yeah.
And they were up big. And I think like just the job Vic Fangio has done there and like the ability of them to reset things, and not only reset things, but like move guys into bigger roles and assimilate new guys, whether it's rookies like Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean coming in, whether it's like, okay, like Darius Slay is at a different phase of his career. Okay, Jalen Carter, now you're the centerpiece of the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
How do we use Zach Bond? I just think the amount of answers that they've had to get that defense playing the way that it is pretty incredible. At the same time, I'm a little worried about where the passing game is right now and what happens if a team can jump on them. And I'm toying with the idea of picking the Rams to beat them this week because I think the Rams have an ability to get on top of you. And we've seen it. Like we saw it the way they got on top of Buffalo, right? And, we've seen Sean McVay get super aggressive in these spots to try to get the other team to play catch up. And if they can somehow find like a few things, like here's a few things we can do out of the box against the Eagles defense and get the Eagles playing from behind in a way where it'll just sort of naturally neutralize Saquon in the running game, could they be in a little bit of trouble?
Where do you stand on Bookgate? Do you think that A.J. Brown really reads the book on the sidelines every week? Or, because Jalen Hurts' quote was interesting on that, which is, I've never seen him read it before.
I heard
a
story about LeBron with this once, that he was like, he'd be like reading a book at his locker when the media came in. And it's like, oh, I didn't know you guys were coming in, and it's like Play-Doh or something,
the ultimate, yes,
yeah.
The ultimate move, yes.
You know what I mean?
We've all done it. We've all done it. Don't act like you've never done it. We've all done it. I've done it.
But the bench during a playoff game is a weird place to do it, isn't it?
So I thought it was interesting that Jalen Hurts said, I know he brings it. I've never seen him read it. And clearly, at that point in the game, A.J. Brown had 3 targets and 1 catch for 10 yards. And after the game, A.J. Brown's like, why do you guys always think I'm frustrated? And it's like, well, because earlier in the season, you said you were frustrated and the offense was an issue. And then the most veteran player in your locker room went on WIP and said there was a rift between you and the quarterback that had to be panically walked back, And so, we're just putting together. It's not like the media is generating this. Yeah. Like it's just kind of out there.
It's like, it's like Brandon Graham created this, dude. Like,
your teammate.
Like, how exactly? The Philly media is definitely culpable for a lot of things, but like, let's not blame them.
This one was Amazon delivered to their doorstep, yeah. So it's like, okay.
Like, Philly, I'm pretty sure the Philly media reacted to that one the same way like 31 other media groups would have reacted.
Yes. If your most veteran player goes on the biggest radio station in the market and says, I think that there's a rift between 2 of the biggest players on the team, at some point people are going to be like, oh yeah, we should think about that. We should, like what self-respecting journalist is just like, white noise. Let's move on.
Stop being an alarmist.
So I agree with you. I think that there's a little bit of there. Yeah. That said, I did enjoy covering the book story. I'm a big book guy. And so got to interview the author of Inner Excellence. That was fun. I read Inner Excellence. I read most. Do you think
he had like some passages highlighted to?
He did. So that's why I want to clear something up, by the way. So I had a column up about an hour after the game with a lot of Inner Excellence content in it. And in my tweet, I said that I had read A.J. Brown's favorite passages. And so everyone is tweeting at me, fake news. How could you have read a whole book in 15 minutes and then written a column about it? I bought the book on Kindle while I was in the Eagles locker room. The second that A.J. Brown, I confirmed the title. And even before then, when it was floating around the internet, I had emailed the author at like 7:30 at night, like in the middle of the game. I emailed the author.
Right? Serious when I'm saying this. If there are any kids out there listening to this who want to be sports writers, listen to Conor's story here, because this is like a really great And I'm not just blowing smoke here because I'm on the podcast with you, Connor. Like, this is a really great reaction to something like that happening. So go ahead.
But then down in the locker room, we're talking to AJ Brown. There's a big scrum, and so you confirm the book title. You buy it. We have a phone, so you buy it on Kindle, and you can tell. And this is a little bit behind the curtain, right? But in an NFL locker room, you can tell if you've got a shot at getting a guy after the scrum is over.
Yep.
And if you're, and especially, people like Albert, guys who have been established national reporters, you're going to get that opportunity. I'm in the middle tier here, and so I'm eyeing it up, and I'm like, okay, there's a couple other people that are going to want to get in there and look at the book, and I see some other national people coming in, they're going to get to see the book. So I was like, okay, how do I win on this? And so I bought the book, and I just darted out of the locker room, and I went up to the press box, and I started reading it as fast as humanly possible. And so I got through the first 5 chapters by the time it was ready to write. So I read, and AJ Brown had said in the scrum that all of his highlighted passages were in the beginning of the book. So I was like, okay, I'm getting the gist of it. Then there were ones in particular that he went back to and he highlighted. But so it was fun. It was a fun book related story, whether it leads to the Eagles hating each other and them losing to the Rams in the playoffs, or leads to them, I don't know, winning a game and moving forward, whatever. But my only takeaway in the Packers too is this is the youngest team in the NFL. They absolutely played like the youngest team in the NFL. And when you lose 60% of your receiving core for the first time all season, the offensive line had set a record for continuity, and then you lose 2 of your offensive linemen in this game. That's a recipe for disaster. Jordan Love throws 3 picks. You fumble the opening kickoff, and at the same time, they didn't call helmet to helmet on that, and Nixon got blasted in the helmet. And so it's like, okay, you don't call any of that. You're going to lose that game. You're not going to win that game. Green Bay tried everything. I give Adam Stenavich and Matt LaFleur a lot of credit. The different ways they tried to get Josh Jacobs going, but with an injured offensive line, with the Eagles defensive line, they're just not there yet. I think they're another year away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also a great example of how, and I don't think you can look at what happened on Sunday and say, oh yeah, everything I thought about the Packers for the last 2 years is null and void now because they had a bad day. That was a calamity of injuries. They were coming in without Christian Watson to begin with. Romeo Doubs goes down in game. Their offensive line, Josh Myers, it was just by the end of that game, they were a shell of themselves just because of all the injuries. LaFleur's gotten so many things right, whether it's bringing in Jeff Hafley as defensive coordinator, knowing when the time was right to go to Jordan Love, developing the young receivers, finding young receivers outside of the first round the way that they have, which Brian Gutekunst deserves credit for that too. And there's going to be some growing pains that you're going to go through. And I think, Jordan Love is sort of he's still too streaky. He's still too up and down. And we saw that on Sunday. But again, in his defense, when you're down that many people, you have to start to take chances. And I think part of the game he had was a reflection of the position that they were in as a team. So if I were the Packers, I'd feel really good about the spot I'm in going forward. I think, it's such a great example of how, I was reading a headline on Monday morning, and it was something along the lines of I don't know. It was just something about having to rethink something about the Packers. And I'm like, this is such a great example of how perception of a team can change in 24 hours.
They're going to be fine. They're the youngest roster in the NFL.
Yeah.
They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But we have to rattle some sabers. So let's move on. This is very conveniently the lightning round. This game went into, this game, the playoff weekend kind of went in order of crappiness,
Yeah.
So Bills 31, Broncos 7. I loved Sean Payton's game plan at the beginning of this. It, let's throw deep. Bo Nix has a big pass to Sutton and then bombs a touchdown. And I was like, holy smokes, here we go. And then Buffalo scores 31 unanswered points, which is fine. Again, same thing with Green Bay.
The Broncos aren't there.
Broncos are going to be good.
They're not there from a roster standpoint yet. You know what I loved that won't get any attention? I love Bo Nix in the 2-minute drill at the end of the first half, and how in command he looked and how he got them in position to get points there at the end. I just watched Bo Nix at the end of the first half, and what he did at the beginning of the game was obviously great. immediately moving the sticks. I think it was a throw down the middle. Was it to Sutton, right? And then the touchdown was to Mims.
Yeah.
There was the throw down. There was the throw like deep down the middle to Sutton to convert. I think it was a 3rd and 8, and then he throws the shot to Mims. But watching him run the 2-minute drill for a rookie, and I know he's a 24-year-old rookie, but watching him run the 2-minute drill, I was like, God, this kid's got it. Like this kid really. I mean, he's not playing with like overwhelming talent around him, and as a rookie, he's putting the team in a playoff situation in a hostile environment against the number 2 seed in position to get points. And so if I were the Broncos, I feel really good about that. A lot of young talent on defense too. It's not just Surtain. It's guys like Benito and Cooper and Riley Moss. Like the Broncos, like the arrow is pointing way up on them.
Agreed. I mean, I think that's all we have to say.
The Bills are a really good team, and they got a heavyweight fight coming this weekend.
Sports writer problem. I'm going to be in Philly. I know you're going to be in Buffalo this weekend. So Philly is at 3:30.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what kind of tenor this game is going to take on, but obviously Baltimore and Buffalo is the centerpiece of this. Yep. And as someone whose job it is to talk about all these games, you want to be able to see the entirety of Baltimore and Buffalo. So it's like, what do you do? I got to really
yeah,
I know. Really got to,
there's that part.
I got to be.
That's part of that. Like I always, cause I've got to cover all of them in my column, and like,
yeah,
I always like try to think like, okay, like what's better? Am I better off being at the late game on Sunday, divisional weekend and championship weekend? I'm like, am I better off being at the late game on Sunday? Or am I better off being at the early game? And because the thing is, if you're at the early game, that means you might miss like up to half of the late game, which sucks, but
yeah.
I don't know if people want to hear about us complaining about getting to travel to playoff games.
It's a great problem to have.
Yeah, it's a champagne problem.
It is a great problem to have. I have absolute champagne problems. There's no doubt about it. And I'm just trying to figure out, do you, maybe you kind of do a different kind of piece on the Eagles game. I'm just, I'm giving everybody a look behind the.
You want like to look behind the curtain. I think what you do is you file a column at the gun. You hope that it's not that close. Not that we root for blowouts, everybody out there, but I wouldn't say it's the worst thing in the world when it becomes a blowout if you're in our position.
When I wrote the Super Bowl was in MetLife Stadium and I was working for the Star Ledger, I was writing the page 1 Super Bowl game story for our newspaper, and that was a big deal. That was a big deal. And what you have to realize is if a story goes page 1, it doesn't just go through the sports guys. Now it goes through the editor-in-chief, the managing editor, neither of whom came from sports.
Yep.
And then it goes through all the news side copy editors who are, we always used to say in the sports department, this is a football is an oval shaped ball kind of story where you have to put in a bunch of qualifiers, you can't really write a good football story. And so the Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl, the Broncos also had a ton of guys from New Jersey, which was a big deal for the Star Ledger, right? Yeah. And so I was like, the only way that I will not puke my guts out is if the Seahawks are up by like 3 touchdowns at halftime. And
sure enough,
wouldn't you know it? And I was like, yes. Like,
thank you, Cam Chancellor.
Yep. I was like, that one was what a tap-in. That was I rooted for that. I prayed for it. Here it goes. All right. Ravens 28, Steelers 14. Again, I mean, for me, it's like, yeah, Derrick Henry's awesome.
By the way, I was just sort of when I said it was a nightmare, I thought you were going to say that you had to do that for the Giants-Patriots Super Bowl, which would have been a really tough one. Like, because at the end was very back and forth. And if you're a newspaper writer, it's really, really hard to manage a game that's back and forth at the end.
Yeah, forget about that. Yeah. That is an absolute nightmare. Yeah. So with this one, I mean, it's impressive in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think Todd Monken gets enough credit here because this is the 3rd time you're facing a Steelers defense. And I don't care how worn down everybody is at the end of the season, whatever. It's still, you're facing one of the best defensive minds in the NFL for a 3rd time. And yes, you're more talented, your team's better, but this is still an offensive line that it was this glaring sirens. This is a big problem at the beginning of the season.
And now it's a strength.
They look great. The Steelers, on the other
And
hand,
we give the O-line some credit too, like because they had their
hell yeah.
I mean, they had their line coach die in the summer, which I
Yeah.
mean, like horrible. And by all accounts, I got a good buddy who actually like played for him at Duke, and so like by all accounts and like my own personal accounts I've gotten from my friend on this, like just like an unbelievable guy, and George Warhop, who's a veteran assistant coach, comes in and coaches the group, and they have to turn over 60% of the offensive line from last year's AFC Championship game. Um, I like just unbelievable, like to rush for 300 yards on the Steelers after everything that line went through. It's a huge credit to like the strength of the Ravens program and the people that were involved there.
Offensive line coaches generally are the greatest dudes on the planet.
Yeah.
They're the guy that you need in that locker room.
Yeah.
But it's been an incredible season for Baltimore. And again, I mean, there's a reason why this next weekend is going to be the premier matchup. I can't wait.
Oh, it's going to be awesome. I mean,
what degrees are you looking at in Buffalo right now?
I haven't even looked yet. I just hope there's no snow because I got to fly to Atlanta in the morning. Hopefully the weather gods take care of me, and you might get like a natural reaction from me here when I look.
Sunday, 19 degrees high, low of 14, and snow in the forecast.
Wow, there you go. Okay, there's no snow in the forecast here, right?
No snow in what forecast?
In the Buffalo forecast.
The one I'm looking at says snow
on Sunday.
Yeah,
on the 19th, I got no snow.
It's so weird that like we're
clearly on different weather apps.
What do you use?
This is just the one that comes with your iPhone. Are you on like AccuWeather or something like that, or Weather Channel?
I'm on weather.com.
Okay, so mine says 15 degrees and clear.
Okay, now weather.com is saying 20 degrees and cloudy, but Sunday night,
cloudy. Cloudy's what
Sunday night, 36% chance of snow, wind at 12 miles an hour, snow accumulations of less than an inch. So you'll be able to get out of there.
Yeah.
So you flying out Sunday night or Monday morning?
So I'm flying out Monday midday. I mean out of Rochester because Buffalo flights were impossible. Flying out of Rochester, then back to Boston through JFK. On Tuesday. And I will say this, if there's one thing people really should be mad about when it comes to analytics, it's what they've done to the airlines. Because they have figured out, like, whatever the maximum you're willing to pay for something is, they have figured that out. And they charge you for it every time. It's like, you can fly anywhere, like you can fly from anywhere in the country to Atlanta for like $100 on a normal Monday. But, on this Monday, not so much.
Last but not least, last and least, Texans 32, Chargers 12.
That's not cool.
I mean, neither, I would have rathered the Chargers in the playoffs because you probably have a higher ceiling when things are going well, but I got absolutely, so I wrote about this game and started an absolute holy war between the pro and anti Herbert factions, which I didn't know existed, but are a very passionate group of people on the internet. My takeaway from this game is that we've reached the limit of what Herbert can do with Quentin Johnston and Will Dissly, and Ladd McConkey's great, but Ladd McConkey is 6 feet tall, and
Ladd McConkey needs help. I mean, Quentin Johnston, so I wrote that first pick where he threw it to Quentin Johnston, and it looked like it was in double coverage. There was one guy there at the beginning, and I was like, if you're Quentin Johnston, you're bigger than that guy, you're stronger than that guy, body him and catch the ball. Now, I've talked to some coaches and some people in the business since then. They're like, it was a bad throw. Justin Herbert shouldn't have made it. And so I'm taking that into account, even though I still kind of disagree and think that, like, if that was Jamar Chase, he might have caught it. If it was Justin Jefferson, he might have caught it. If it was Malik Neighbors, he might have caught it. You know what I mean? I don't want to be mean, but like, how can a pro receiver like hands should be something you can work on, right? Like, and I'm not saying like you can turn into Randy Moss with like the hand-eye coordination to go with late hands and everything else, but like Quentin Johnston had this problem in college. How has it not been fixed? Like to a reasonable degree?
I don't know. And there always have been a big, receivers coaches. We did that project years ago, Albert, and I remember that that term kept coming up over and over again where there are alphas and there are not alphas.
Right.
And right now, I think Quentin Johnson is like a 35% contested catch guy. It's not
because he
what
has
Justin
everything
Herbert
you'd
needs.
want, like athletically,
For sure. Yeah.
Like, but I just that's something you should be able to work on. Like you mentioned Jamar Chase, right? So I'll never forget. But Jamar Chase remember his rookie year,
all the drops in training camp.
In training camp, right? So I remember I actually showed my oldest son who loves football, who's got really good hands. I showed him this with Jamar Chase. This video I took of Jamar Chase. It was like at training camp, Bengals training camp. Like after practice broke, I was standing out there on the field and catching up with a few coaches. And we probably stood out there. Me and a couple of the guys stood out there for like a half hour, 45 minutes. So practice had been over for a while. And you've been to like the Bengals practice fields, right? Like how they're right outside the stadium and you have to cross the city street to get there, right?
Yeah.
So I hear in the background, I hear a doof, doof, doof. You know what I mean? Like that sound. And I turn around and it's Jamar Chase on his knees catching balls with like an equipment guy just shooting balls at him out of the jugs machine. And like he wasn't that was not performative because there's nobody out there except for me and like 3 assistant coaches. You know what I mean? And I remember seeing that and I'm like, this is going to get taken care of, And I don't know. Like, that's why I say, like, I think that this is a correctable problem. You would think it is, but maybe it isn't. I don't know. Like, because I think of that example of Chase, and how often does Chase drop the ball now?
It's hard, right? Because it's like you don't know.
You don't know because like it's hard. But yeah, it's just an interesting question. Anyway, like the Chargers, like they're another team. Like throw them in the bucket with the Packers and the Broncos. The arrow is pointing way up.
Sure.
And you should not feel bad about this. Like they're way ahead of where they were a year ago. And I still 100% like would say they did the right thing in taking Joe Alt instead of Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze or any of the other receivers that were available to them. They wound up getting a really good receiver in the second round. I don't think like when you're building something that you take the receiver over the tackle, despite the Bengals having gotten that one anomaly right. And they would have been good, I think, if they had taken Penei Sewell there over Jamar Chase,
Sure.
Yeah. So like, I think the Chargers, I still look at them and say, I think for the most part, they made Justin Herbert this year. They made him better. You've used this line on the podcast before. They made him better by asking less of him. And in the way of asking less of him, they made the other parts of the team better. And they got in this spot in this game where now they had to ask more of him again, and they didn't have enough around him to support it.
I agree. A lot of Americans apparently do not. And a lot of people hate Justin Herbert, which is, again, like I was joking with our editor when I filed the column. I was like, I'm writing about Chargers, Texans. No one's going to read this. I was like, I'll be lucky if my mom clicks on this.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you really...
I know there's going to be one vehement defender of Justin Herbert who wears khakis and lives in Los Angeles. So
what did he call him after the game? An absolute beast?
Oh, did he after the game?
Harbaugh, or it was like an absolute beast, or I think it was absolute beast. Okay. Was someone asked him like how Harbaugh played or how Herbert played, and Jim was like, same as always, absolute beast. And
I had like I'll never forget at the owners meeting. If they win Super Bowls together, I will always remember this moment. Where at the owners meeting, like they're in the coaches breakfast. Harbaugh's talking about Herbert. And it was like somebody had asked some questions just about Herbert as a player. It had nothing to do with like where Harbaugh wound up going. And it's like, yeah, like sometimes I just like to call Justin to see how his day's going. It was like, what? Just want to make sure he's having a good day. It's like, okay.
Those are the ones that you see come up sometimes. You're like, I could probably pretend I'm in the shower, right? And then forget, act like I forgot to call him back later. Well, we're here. We're coming up on the divisional round, which is probably my favorite NFL weekend.
Yep.
I think it's probably the most fun.
Hopefully it's
I'll be in Philly.
Hopefully we have hopefully it's not doesn't play out the same way that Wild Card Weekend did.
I think
which
there
it
will be
normally
some
doesn't,
blowouts.
right? We normally,
No.
at least last year, this happened last year too, where we had a non-competitive Wild Card Weekend, and then we got a super competitive divisional weekend. So hopefully that same thing happens again.
Check at si.com for our updated picks and stories throughout the week. Matt and Gilberto will be back with you guys on Thursday to preview all the matchups. They only got 4. They got nothing. These guys they're going to be coasting into the weekend. Albert will be in Buffalo. I'll be in Philadelphia. Follow along with us everywhere we go. And thank you guys as always. Go Irish.
Go Bucs.